It's 7 o'clock on the computer, 7 o'clock on my watch. So I will call this meeting to order. I'll turn it over to you for roll call.
All right, Commissioner Schneider is absent. Commissioner Wolf?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Volkman?
Here.
Commissioner Hedstrom?
Here.
Commissioner Feldbush?
Here.
And Commissioner Griffiths is here also, so welcome aboard.
Yeah.
And we have a quorum.
Good deal. All right, everyone's been presented with the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
It's been moved. Do you have a second?
Second.
All right. Moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And no opposition. Motion passes. We'll move on to new business, TXT 23-02.
This is a consideration of an amendment to Article 21 supplementary use regulations, conditional uses, and accessory uses, prohibited uses, establishing guidelines for commercial solar installation in unincorporated Dickinson County. And this came up, I think, when we were doing the update for the wind farm regulations. I think that it was mentioned by several of the commissioners that we might want to look at possibly addressing solar as well. And so this is kind of like the launch point that I've kind of decided to go with. It's difficult to really come up with any information in the state of Kansas because there's only 2 counties that I'm really familiar with that have addressed this issue, and they're both classified as urban counties. It's Johnson County and also my cohort in Douglas County has reached pretty much the same conclusion. So their regulations on solar tend to be a lot more restrictive because just like us, they have the provision in their regulations of preserving agricultural land. And so what they've run into situations where they don't want to prohibit, but they're trying to discourage a whole lot of the alternative energy because they're kind of constrained with their ag land and they want to preserve as much of that viable land as possible. And while still allowing people to do what they want to do, have a proposal. But this is a staff-initiated review of Article 21 to include a discussion on possible amendment to establish provisions for large-scale solar facilities within unincorporated areas in the county. The commission had approached staff last year after the amendments to the provisions for commercial wind farms were passed to also consider an amendment to include provisions for solar farms. This discussion this evening will apply to all commercial projects of a scale and scope exceeding those already established by precedent. And by that I mean the one that we approved, the DS&O 8 acres that's owned and operated by DS&O last year out there by Solomon. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at with this is we want to basically keep the scale to that level, or do we want to allow for similar to like what we did with the wind farms where we said, multiple parcels on multiple, spread out over a certain acreage, So the comprehensive plan that was adopted from last year addresses alternative energy sources such as solar and wind in 2 sections. It's in the economic and the land use section. Chapter 5 recommends encouraging promoting responsible establishment of conventional and new or alternative energy sources. Chapter 7, which is the land use chapter, under agricultural rural preservation policies, states that commercial and industrial activity, including but not limited to renewable energy production, should include consideration of locations which are of most benefit overall and least detrimental to adjacent rural land uses. And the items, I've kind of made a list of items to consider when considering these provisions, which is solar, unlike wind energy, is a much more land-intensive utility. Infrastructure with the potential of like 1,500, I looked this up online, it says 1,500 to 2,000 panels per acre is potential, according to the website solarenergyhackers.com. Solar is also subject to similar federal incentives as wind energy. There is currently no use allowed either by right or through a conditional use permit, which would be comparable to a large-scale solar infrastructure currently in our regulations. Solar projects typically, but not in all cases, follow wind projects in the same locations and sometimes work in tandem with another type of use that we may want to address in the future, which is battery power storage facilities, which are those facilities that utilize these rechargeable batteries that store their entire facilities that take up acres of these batteries that will store energy from solar and wind and basically use it as a way of shoring up the power grid, because it will be tied into the grid, and they will shore that up with those batteries. And that's something I'm running into now in Saline County. They've got a proposal that's going in front of them for that type of use as well. So I'm going to try to kind of I'll bring some information to you when the time comes from what I'm learning over there now, which is it's interesting, but it doesn't always have to be solar or wind. It's those facilities, those battery storage facilities, basically get their power that they're storing from the grid itself, so that in times when there's a heavy usage of that, of like, let's say the grid is overtaxed, then they will release some of that energy in those battery storage facilities to help keep there from being like blackouts and things. So the other thing is the commission must consider the preservation of viable agricultural land when determining conditions to set on the approval of such uses. The wind energy we talked about, because I think we've determined that really there's the lease area that individual turbines would take up would be small enough that it wouldn't necessarily adversely impact a property that has, like, let's say 160 acres, and a couple of the 2 or 3 of those turbines is not going to adversely affect the ability to farm around the rest of that area. So whereas with solar, it might. And because of the density per acre that they put those panels on. Although Dickinson County does not have any adopted what I call view shed overlays, those are regulations that preserve scenic views in specific areas, the commission may consider potential impact to overall rural character and alternative energy for any alternative energy proposal may have. In general, the same provisions the county has adopted for wind energy facilities may be applied to solar as well. That includes decommissioning plans, it includes setback requirements, it includes bonding, and all those things, the very same kind of stipulations that we put on other forms of renewable energy like wind, we can apply to these characteristics as well. Johnson County provides the only example in Kansas, and I would also say Douglas County as well. I just didn't get a chance to print theirs off. In Kansas, that addresses solar farms in their regulations, and this is because, as I said, those are urban type counties, and but it's heading in this direction basically. I mean, there's going to be these types of larger scale, and I've given you kind of an example from Evergy. There's a large presentation. It was kind of a PowerPoint presentation that kind of goes over the information that they have for how big those, what usually you will encounter when you get a proposal like a solar proposal, one of these larger scale ones, and explains what what the typical questions are. This is something that Evergy and this other company that was involved in Saline County or not Saline County, but Johnson County has provided, and they provided it to, they've got it online. And I just went ahead and printed it off for you guys to look at, because it gives good question and answer, typical Q&A stuff for that type of a use. The commission options this evening would be to direct staff to compose language for a resolution approving large-scale solar farms based on provisions recommended by the commission, or direct staff to compose language for a resolution establishing provisions for solar projects of a scale and scope for which precedence has already been established. Or item 3, which is table for further discussion and more information. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Questions?
Well, you said you have a cohort, I guess, from Douglas County.
Yeah.
Is the large solar farm north of Lawrence, is that proposed or has that been approved?
It's not been approved yet.
Okay, I just seen the proposal and it has one
Yeah.
of those battery storage units with it.
Yes, yeah.
That's on some prime
Yeah.
agricultural land. I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, and one of the things I think that Douglas County did, and I think it explains it in that document I gave you there for Johnson County, is it talks about you can require them to have, to seed, or put native grass underneath those panels, those areas where they're covering the panels, and have the panels up high enough to where you can mow around them or whatever, but you can't put crops under there, but you can put native grass to keep it viable, because the way that a lot of times the way these solar arrays are set up is they tend to follow the sun. So they'll be like in this angle here, the sun's falling here, and underneath there they'll have grass planted, and as the sun moves, it will move this way, and it'll be high enough up, mounted high enough to where you can get around those to keep that ground viable with the native grass. You can plant native grass there and still maintain it, so that when they do decommission it, it's still you don't lose the viability as much as you would if it were just totally covered, and didn't do anything at all, because they do cast shade on there, and that's why one of the things, and I think the problem that Johnson County, the Planning Commission in Johnson County wanted it more restrictive. The County Commission said no, and that's been kind of like the point of contention was basically keeping it so that you can keep that agricultural land that's underneath those arrays viable enough with the native grass, because it does take maintenance to do that. And but it's instead of having them so close to the ground where you can't get underneath there and nothing will grow, there's going to be enough space between that panel and the ground where you can maintain it. But and the Planning Commission wanted that. County Commission, what was controversial is because the County Commission felt that was too restrictive, and there was kind of a back and forth between their county commissioners and Planning Commission. That's what the one article is that I had in there for you, is that that's the big controversy for their projects. And it's so I think that if we can hammer out something that I think we can all kind of like, if I can get some sort of a general idea from what our county commission would probably think of for us, in terms of how they feel about this type of use, whether it would be they would want more restrictive or less restrictive. I would probably want to try to get their input on that, and just kind of coordinate so there wouldn't be that controversy that they had over in Johnson County, so.
Now, when you say, so we have the precedent being the 8-acre one,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
And a large scale would be, probably a lot like what you're talking about, the ones that also include the battery
yes,
piece, that's kind of what that would be.
yeah.
And are they any larger than the one
The,
that is in our county already?
well, you're talking about the minimum acreage, if you look online, the minimum acreage ironically is 8 acres. But the majority of these, what I'm talking about and like what this presentation that I printed off for you basically say, those take up acres and acres and acres in multiple parcels with multiple ownerships. And so and the density on those varies, as far as per acre density. They said it goes up to, I think, a maximum of 2,000 per acre is what they can fit on the those modern solar farms, so. And one of the things to consider with when I said precedent, it's also, you're talking about, they're using, in the case of DS&O, what their proposal is they would hook up to the grid and kind of similar to what I was describing earlier with the battery storage facilities, is to help kind of shore up the grid in the times when there's a lot of demand on it, and then they can switch over to the solar, and it kind of some of that power will relieve the stress on the system. And so that's the other thing to look at as well, is because the smaller scale ones, like the ones that are done by a utility company, will tend to be used as an accessory type use or an accessory or supplemental type power for the grid that they've already hooked up to.
Keep going, from keep them going out of
Yes.
what do I wanna call it, the 4 o'clock to 7.
Yes.
And when they're gonna go into the peak time, they can use that to keep them out of
Right.
the peak time.
Questions? Thoughts? Motion?
So Tim, on the Exeter decommission mitigation strategy, would they be bonded?
Yes.
Similar, so they would have to put up bond,
Yes.
not just promissory letter, but
Right.
it has to be bonded.
Right, and this is what we've been kind of dealing with. We're very emphatic
Agreed.
about that and making sure, because letters of credit don't mean anything.
No, toilet paper.
Yeah. And the county's run into situations where that's been the case, where we've been burned once or twice.
So how do we determine the level of bond? The wind towers, we did that on those and the wind turbines, and you'd think, well, there's concrete in the ground, but these things are gonna have batteries, and batteries can, leak or break or catch fire.
Yeah.
And so how do we determine the bond value, in case there's something, bad happens?
We would have
baseball, softball size hail, and breaks a bunch of batteries, and we've got, I don't know how it works, but, got broken batteries and acid over, 120 acres.
Yeah.
The EPA might say, and again, I'm way exaggerating here, but they might say, take the top 5 feet of dirt off 120 acres.
Yeah.
And the company just goes, well, we can't afford that, we're going belly up. Well, tough.
Yeah.
So how do we establish a bond value for something like this? It feels different to me than wind turbines.
It is a little bit different, yeah. First of all, to kind of like address the issue with the batteries, when I say batteries, the ones that's being proposed now in Saline County, these are like hermetically sealed. These are there's like a 7 acres facility where these things are like stacked inside a sealed, hermetically sealed container that and there's like I think there's like 500 feet of gravel around that facility so that if there is a fire, it won't go out, it won't spread. So and they tend, and this is what they've told me, this is what that one company said, is they described that if those things ever do catch fire, they tend to, don't ask me how, but they said that they burn from the inside and they're not exothermic. They burn from within and not, and because that casing around it keeps the flames inside that casing, so it won't go out. But that's
like a battery powered car.
Yeah.
You see pictures of on the
yeah,
interstate.
it won't. They said it's not going to blow up. They said it implodes.
These kind of like a dry cell?
Yes, similar to a dry cell or I don't know what they call, I forget what they call them now, but they used to call them NICADs. But there's something else now, cobalt.
Tornado proof.
So, so I would want some kind of a, not from the person the vendor that's doing it, but I'd want some kind of a report from somebody independent that says, hey, here's what you need to have for a correct bond for something like this.
Yeah, and what we would do is probably, because the county has a contracted engineer, we would have that contracted engineer do that for us. And or have a it would be one of those things where like I think we could have them agree to or it would be like a mutually agreed to, okay, this engineer will determine that for us, that kind of thing, and come up with a reasonable response or reasonable amount. But there's going to be the same as with the solar, the same as with the wind farms, there would still be wear and tear during construction on the roads, so there would be also a performance bond on the roads as well.
Which is kind of my second question, due to potential fire, building them out, and it's pretty intensive, it's going to be, if they do that, will we require them to be positioned kind of like per our county plan developments close to roads where there is, where it's easy for ingress and egress
Yes.
off the blacktop and it's easy for emergency services to get there and
Yeah.
it's not down a dirt road
And there's
south of Carlton or something.
yeah, right, yeah.
Good idea.
We don't have access or can get access to some bonding company that's done one of these?
Yeah, that's what we do with, that's what we've been trying to, we've been working with the third-party engineer that we've got working with us on that will be working with us on the wind farm project is our engineer. We still have, he's technically a third-party engineer, but he'll work all that because he's got experience in dealing with the road maintenance aspect of it. And what to bond for the road maintenance.
So you were talking about them being elevated so that the sunlight would filter down and grow, nature underneath it.
You could get underneath there and put native grass.
So by it being maintained, does that mean that they'd be high enough out in the pasture that cattle could maintain it? Or a person would have to go?
Well, it depends. It's, I don't see why the cattle couldn't maintain it.
I don't know, I see these things hanging right here. I don't know if they want cattle.
They did have to.
Well, the cattle, I'll tell you, the cattle.
All their stuff in pipes and where it'd be durable, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious what elevating them meant.
They were talking like 10 foot. I
Okay.
think 10 foot up, and that would give enough room to get equipment under there to maintain it. And but it's one of the things that as far as kind of going back to the wind farm thing, I said we went down to Marion County and staff looked at some of the one that's down there, I guess in the north part of the county in Marion, and cows love them. The cows are like in the shade.
Yeah, I've seen them lined up,
Like lined up,
30,
things.
40 long.
But one of the things though, you know, like I say, it's like with the same with the wind energy as well, is that you have to consider what impact solar would have this type of use on any kind of rural character, you know, from the road, you know, what's it gonna look like, you know, that kind of thing. It can affect, sometimes some people, you know, rural character for people, so that's kind of a mixed bag, because some people think, well, it hasn't really affected rural character. I said if it's out there and it's functioning the way, you know, the same way a crop would function, you know, kind of, but if this is for energy, or is it a significant impact on, you know, the visual aspect of, like, does it affect, like, okay, well, one day it's nice pristine grass, and then all of a sudden you look over and see a bunch of reflective things. So those are the things to look at, even though we don't have, as I said, we don't have anything in our regulations that deal with view sheds, but we do address in there, you know, basically from what our comp plan says, those types of uses, just, you know, look at whether or not it's the impact on the character, it's the location of where that's gonna be proposed, and it's case by case basis. So is the location of where that's gonna be, you know, where something is proposed, is that going to affect the character of that area? So it's kind of subjective, but it is in there to consider. So it's subjective enough to where you can say a proposal is, yeah, it could have a detrimental effect on the character, or no, it doesn't really have any detrimental effect, just that the character is still there. It's consistent. So it's just it's sufficiently subjective enough in the comprehensive plan to give you the option. Going, you know, either way. So you know, as I said, the alternatives for this would be to just either have me put together a resolution tonight, you know, put together something for the next meeting, or just table for further discussion.
Anybody feel strongly?
I'd like to see some more info. I'd like to see some bond and, you know, just some info there. I'd like to understand, what does 10 feet really mean? I mean, is that the bottom, is that the top? How's it gonna be maintained underneath it? Do they have any preliminary locations, you know, that we could kind of eyeball?
What I'll try to do is get Douglas County's, because I think she sent me something a while back when I was researching this a few months ago. And I think I've got a copy of that, and I'll just get that to you guys too next time. And see what they say about setbacks and the height and all that kind of stuff. And give you an idea.
Anything we can do to make money out there is great, but I just want to understand, you know, more of the details.
Do you know what constitutes as a panel? Like, is one square, or is a panel the whole thing with the little squares inside of it?
The little squares inside of it.
Okay.
Is all kind of, that's the one unit. It used to be that was the case where you would have one individual cell. But the way that they make them now is they put like several cells in one package.
Okay. So, I mean, if somebody was to ever do this, like a big company like what's doing the wind farm, and you've got here 15 to 2,000 panels per acre, can we regulate how many panels get put on? Because I mean, I see some of these pictures here and there's a ton.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, do you really need, because if you get somebody with 8 acres and they're trying to fill the whole thing with having just enough space for maybe somebody to walk through.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, can we
You can.
regulate that through this, or
You can.
is that even something worthwhile to do?
You can, that's something I'd probably want to, what I'll do is talk with, I'll get some feedback from admin on it as well and see what their take on it would be. You know, which direction we wanna go, do we wanna make it where we can restrict it based on the density, the number of panels per acre, or, you know, and I think it's been a while, but if I remember correctly, I thought Douglas County did that as well. But I'll have to double check and see. I'll bring that to you, their regulations next meeting.
So, Jim, are you making a motion to table it until we get some more information?
If that requires a motion to
Yeah.
take a look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine. And I do like his idea of, you know, let's understand what density means, because if they're looking at it to make profit, I'm guessing they'll want it as dense as they can.
Yeah.
But if we wanna maintain some rural character or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, so like you're saying, maybe we just have that as the ability to regulate density based on, you know, mutually agreed between us and that or whatever.
So there's
So moved.
a motion to table for further discussion and more info from staff. Do I have a second? Second. All right, it's been second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay? I thought I heard everybody. All right, we'll just wait to hear more info. I'll get some from you at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Old business, there's none. I've got miscellaneous. What I wanted to kind of talk to you about a little bit is for future discussions, you know, similar to this one that we're having. The first big thing is good news. We have been approved by FEMA for our new flood maps. We got our letter of final determination, and we'll have 6 months to adopt them, so we have until March to adopt them, but they'll be adopted before that. But so.
That's appropriate now that we haven't had any rain for some
Yes. Yeah, but what I was gonna say is the first thing that I've gotta do is FEMA, actually Division of Water Resources in Topeka wants me to put together basically our chapter that we have, I think it's chapter 12 in our zoning regulations, that's a floodplain overlay. They want me to update that, send it to them to look at, and as a resolution, and I'll come in front of you either next month or probably November, because I know how the state likes to take their time with stuff, so they're gonna review my resolution before I take it to you and say that, make sure that I have everything in there that they want for the language. And when that resolution comes before you, you'll do it like, it's gonna be a public hearing like always, and it'll be forwarded on to the county commission at that point for them to, you know, approve it and adopt those flood insurance, both the flood insurance study and the flood insurance rate maps. We only have to worry about the unincorporated area of Dickinson County because Abilene, Solomon, Chapman, all of those communities have their own that they're dealing with. They have to approve on their own timeline. And so, but the Dickinson County, unincorporated Dickinson County is, we've got ours slated for, our effective date will be March 14th next year. So the other thing that I would like to kind of in the future talk with you guys about, since we're updating our zoning code, is our MHP regulations, manufactured home park regulations. I think that previous staff started working on that several years ago, and it got lost in the hole somewhere, in the black hole of my you know my filing cabinet. So.
So would this be mobile home parks in the unincorporated part of Dickinson County?
Yeah, just if some people who, you remember that one that was approved up near Chapman several years ago, it was just a
North of Upland.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And and that's the one that, you know, was controversial because they didn't size the lagoon right, and so I told him, I said, when he came to renew his conditional use permit, I said, you have to take one of those vehicles off and keep it off, because you're not sized appropriately. So a lot of that stems from, I think that we can avoid a lot of that kind of stuff in the future if we just address it in our zoning regs and have some provisions in there that kind of lay out minimum, acreage and that kind of stuff. And, but I think what happened was previous staff had gotten too busy with some other things and they just never came in front of you. I think I saw where they actually put together some decent regulations. It's just I don't think it ever came in front of you for consideration. So I'm gonna do that. The other couple of things that I have left is that we will probably want to talk about are tiny homes. That's gonna be an issue. It's turning into an issue, a huge one. I'd like to reintroduce in our regulations the planned unit development, which is we used to have, when we had commercial and industrial zoning, we also had planned unit development, which was a way of mixing residential type uses with, like, let's say office commercial or light commercial type activity in the same, and there's like a proportion. There's like, for so many acres of commercial use that you have to, on that parcel, you have to have a certain percentage of residential use, so to kind of balance it out. So basically making a mixed use type facility, and what kind of started that was probably, we've got some development going on in the north part of the county that's kind of would probably fit into this category and allow those individuals up there to do what they want to do without, just get approved from you guys, and as long as they, explain what they're doing, and as long as it doesn't cause problems for traffic in the area up there. So I'm cloaking my language there so that it's not so I don't get into trouble. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's all that's gonna come up, and what I would like to do is we're looking at probably, those are the big items in the zoning regs, and once I get all those items taken care of, we're looking at probably February or so getting done with updating this, my anticipation, updating the zoning regs by February with all this, or March. I would like to get it done before June, because June is when the wind farm proposal is anticipated for second quarter next year. And I'd like to get this kind of zoning update done by then, so.
Would the additional changes you made last time to the rural agricultural lot split, would that be in there?
Yeah, that's in there, that's part of it. That was part of it, because, the first thing you do for implementing the comprehensive plan is to make sure that your zoning regulations and subdivision regulations, So I'm, other than that, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Everybody ready to adjourn?
So moved.
Try a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, have a good night.